Chinese Mangoes by Gregory Brandt. During the 3 years I lived in a rainforest here in Hawaii with my two cats, Moses and Keanu, I made some mistakes. I worked day labor at a staffing company way too much. I was usually paid minimum wage or sometimes less, and it was a 2 to 3 hour bus trip into town and a 2 to 3 hour bus trip back. Some mornings I would leave before the sun came up and wouldn't get back until dark. I basically worked to supply my habits and bus fare. My bus pass was $60 a month, and I smoked weed and cigarettes. On the weekends, I'd sometimes drink cheap malt liquor by myself in the rainforest with my cats. Sometimes in life, God will give you something like a mango tree to slap some sense into you. Looking back, I should have just grown weed out there in the forest. In 3 years, hardly anyone stumbled across my campsite, and I had over 10 acres that I claimed to be my own. Ample enough room for a large garden. I didn't have food stamps, and before I got my propane stove, I was forced to eat fast food every day. I could have had a massive vegetable garden and ate much better as well. The stupidest thing I did was wear socks during that time. I had worn socks my whole life, but wearing socks in Hawaii is another story. I remember once an older, more experienced homeless person told me to ditch the socks, and he was real serious about it. But for some reason, I didn't listen. I had a massive foot odor problem during this time while I was homeless, and that could have easily been diverted if I had not worn socks. Regardless, I got settled into my day labor lifestyle and made the best of it for 3 years. The jobs I worked were usually tedious and demanding. Every place that I worked at, I was more qualified and much more educated than everyone else. And during those 3 years, I probably worked at 25 different job sites doing all kinds of labor, from cleaning construction sites, scrubbing the downtown sidewalk, or emptying overstuffed trucks from China. I was always more educated and more skilled than all of my coworkers. I remember once I was unloading a truck with a bunch of brutes, and I tried showing them a much more efficient way of doing it by letting gravity help the boxes lightly fall off the truck and onto the pallet. Some Hawaiian guy who must have been in his 50s and been doing the same job for 20 years laughed at my idea, but after 30 minutes or an hour, they all saw that my way was much more efficient, and I had gotten more than twice or 3 times of the work done. The Hawaiian brute was so upset, just walking around stomping, they had to send him home. I didn't quote-unquote rub it in. I just pointed out how I was very right and he was very wrong. All the workers started doing it my way, but nobody once thanked me or gave me credit. It's all about who you know in Hawaii. Hawaii has one of the lowest performing public schools of any industrious country, and I noticed many of the teachers at the schools I taught at later on, they had never even been to college. Hawaii is also one of the least educated states in the United States. Big surprise how my degree didn't mean shit. So anyways, during this time I was homeless in the rainforest. I was working day labor jobs for 3 years, but one day the manager of the day labor place calls me up and says, "Gregory, we're sorry, but your state ID has expired and we can't send you out on any jobs until you get that fixed." Now, I didn't have any money at the time, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Even if I had gathered all the proper paperwork, I still didn't have the $50 or so to pay the DMV. I managed to have a friend from the church I went to loan me $30, but I was still short. I also needed money for food, bus fare, and cigarettes. After I ran out of food, I started collecting more mangoes from this large mango tree near my campsite. Then, by happenstance one day, I ran into this little person named Durba from Sri Lanka, who I had originally met at the farm I worked at in Waianae when I first moved here. Durba wasn't just a little person, but he also had long, strange fingers that curled at the end. His ears were pointy, too. He wasn't just someone I knew from the farm, but he was a close friend, and I had smoked weed with him a few times. I ran into him in Chinatown, where they sell all the fruits and vegetables, and he was helping somebody move their fruits and vegetables. I explained my situation to Durba and told him that I knew of a mango tree with over 100 mangoes. He agreed to help me sell the mangoes and for me to meet him on Monday morning at the same spot in Chinatown. I spent all weekend collecting as many mangoes as I could, falling out of the tree a few times as I did. I put all the mangoes I collected, over 100, in a big rectangle milk crate that I had gotten from behind the Foodland grocery store. It was a long bus ride to Chinatown because the mangoes had a very bad smell, and at one point a few of them came out of the crate and rolled all around the crowded bus. When I finally got to Chinatown, Durba was there waiting for me, but his excited face quickly turned to disappointment when he saw my mango haul. "Chinese mangoes?" he said appallingly. "You brought me Chinese mangoes? These are worthless," he said. "Durba don't like Chinese mangoes." He grudgingly still agreed to help me sell them, but the only sales we came from was from curious tourists wondering why a tall, good-looking man was standing with a little person from Sri Lanka selling mangoes on the side of the street in Chinatown. Finally, at about lunchtime, another vendor who was working near us, an elderly Asian woman, came up to me and asked why I was selling mangoes. I told her it was because I needed the money for an ID so I could get back to my other shitty job. She asked how much I was short, and I told her about $30 or whatever it was, and then she bought the box for me for that price and saved me and Durber another half day of shame selling shitty mangoes. Last I heard, Durber went to Sri Lanka, but every time I would see him in Chinatown, he would always say, "Chinese mango!"